What's going on, everybody? I'm on Morningside right now. My lips are a little, because it's early. I just came from the gym. Guess what? I saw the film Morningside yesterday, and I'm actually on Morningside right now. I'm about 5 minutes from home. So I live in this area. I actually work in this area. So I'm very excited to do a little takeaway of the film. Not long, just about 5 things I really appreciated and observed from the film, especially from an educator's point of view. I'm an educator, storyteller, and I live and work in this community, So one thing I'll say is I'm very proud of the film because stories that come from the soil have a very deep impact and they're needed, and they don't come very often. So that's something to be proud of, It's good to see a film called Morningside from Canadian people, from Toronto people, filmmakers, not just all Marvel this, Marvel that. Now, I'm going to just share 5 takeaways from the film, and we'll get to it. But I am very proud, and I hope everyone who sees the film is encouraged to tell their own stories, because if we don't tell our own stories, nobody will. So for everyone that was involved in the film, big up yourself, thank you so much. And here go 5 takeaways from the film Morningside, live from Morningside. No, I'm actually going to do the rest from my studio. Talk soon. What's up? Record School is here. So yeah, let's continue the review of the movie Morningside, which came out this year, 2025, very recently. I got my notes here. The movie was directed by Ron Diaz. Who's also one of the writers. So here's my takeaway. Things that I enjoyed and things that I didn't enjoy too much. And I want to know what you think. This is from an educator's point of view, but also someone that currently resides in Scarborough. I didn't grow up in Scarborough, but I've been living in Scarborough for the past 10 years, working in Scarborough for the past 15 years, so I'm out here. Let's get into it. What I appreciated about the movie Morningside the most, 3 things, are that watching the movie felt like being at home. I felt like I was inside the movie. I felt like I was inside of Scarborough. At some points, I didn't feel like I was in a movie theater. I felt like I was out at Fredericks, or out at different restaurants that are featured in the movie, out at Scarborough locations, in the Roti Spot, in Warden Station. That was pretty cool. So the settings that they used was very realistic in terms of bringing me into the environment of Scarborough, especially the Morningside area. So that was nice to see. It was refreshing, and I'm very proud once again of everyone involved in the film. The next thing I really appreciated about the movie was the positivity that was displayed in the relationship between Amber Rose and her mother, Fee. This was one of the subsets of the film, right? There are a few different subplots that run together. This was my favorite. I really liked the mother-daughter relationship because you could see that there was love that was existing in these characters, even though there was some generational conflict. I loved those two together. And I also loved, I got my phone here so I can get the names of the characters. Devon, he was Amber's teenage boyfriend. Devon was 16, Amber's 14, but Devon was really respectful. And I just really like that. I like that portrayal of him. Because sometimes teenagers can be really rough, especially in the Morningside area. They can be not rough, but they can be a little rough around the edges, especially in the Morningside area when there is romance involved, teenage love, like Slick Rick says. But in the film, this young man was a perfect gentleman, and that's a cool, refreshing things to see, especially among Black characters, because I'm always aware of critical race theory, stereotypes that get reinforced explicitly or implicitly, and the impact of those messages and the impact of the elements that go into the story. So the fact that Ron Diaz and everyone put together, some wholesome positivity that didn't seem campy, it was something that I really appreciated in the film. And I also appreciated the third thing I'll appreciate. So the first thing I liked was the settings were very realistic. The second piece I enjoyed was the relationship between Amber Rose and her mom, and also Amber Rose and her boyfriend Devin, because I liked the love that was shared in the love that kind of flowed through the conflicts that the 3 of them were having. The third thing I appreciated was the portrayal of the women at the community center. The Shanice character, Fee, who's Amber Rose's mom. At one point, there's a woman who teaches Amber Rose some singing lessons. That was realistic to some of the programs that I'm involved in, my kids are involved in, my students are involved in. There was one part I really appreciated where Amber's mom had to look for her, and she came in the community center, and the other women were like, yeah, she's over there, she's been in the gym, you know. They know there was the village aspect of it, and, you know, it seemed very realistic. I appreciated that piece of the film. So those are my three things that I really appreciated. Now, three things that I had a problem with from an educator's point of view. The first one was, I don't understand what the writer, Ron Diaz and his co-writer, writing credits of the show are Ron Diaz and Joanne Jensen. I don't understand what they were trying to say about Black Death in the story, because it seemed that the story ended with a horrible shooting. Spoiler alert, the story ended with a horrible shooting. And it seemed like, was this the most significant takeaway of the film that they wanted to leave the audience with? Is that at the end of the day, in the Morningside community, the Scarborough community, a Black community where there's some marginalization happening, gentrification, and, you know, different levels of socioeconomic struggle, at the end of the day, the Black people will kill one another. That's the end of story. That's what they want us to be left with. I wasn't sure if that's what they were trying to put across, or that's what they didn't think about. But I really got disappointed by that, because there are certain parts of the film that are inspiring, but at the end of the day, the final takeaway is just more of the same. And I don't understand why they didn't try and tell stories about Black communities that don't involve death, violence, and us killing each other, because there are more stories in Black communities like Scarborough, like Morningside, that are about brilliance, complexity, joy, resilience, all types of combinations of incredible things that don't involve death. But that's not the case. And I was very, very disappointed about that, especially since there's new evidence, or there's so much material that comes from Scarborough that represents resilience, that represents brilliance, that represents complex intersecting parts of life. Here's an example. Matthew Morris's book. He's a Scarborough educator, Black Boys Like Me. A lot of his story about growing up in Scarborough involves reflecting on complex things and overcoming a lot of hardships, but in a very inspiring, conscious way. My favorite story coming from, or that revolves around Scarborough, is The Brother by David Cheriandy. I haven't read the book, but I haven't watched the film. I've read this book many times. I've worked with students about this book many times. These stories do involve violence and hardship, but that's not the takeaway. That's not, the final, inflection point, where in the film Morningside, it seems like that's what they want us to think about the most at the end, because that's kind of, nothing really moves past that. And I didn't really understand it. It didn't seem well thought out to me at all. It felt quite depressing. So, yeah. Number one thing I had a problem with was the overemphasis of Black death and murder as the kind of main takeaway of the film. And if I'm misreading it, I'm sorry. I do apologize. My second thing I really got bothered by was the portrayal of men in the film, Black men in particular, and how dumb they came across. I swear to God. The character Josh was a solid character. He was an inspiring character. I liked his perseverance to be a police officer, move to Bolton, but not want to leave the Mandem home, not want to leave his family home. I like that. But his friends, he had a set of friends, two other Black men, and then their names were, their names, I don't know what their names were. Josh's two buddies. They were kind of like happy-go-lucky, Mandem, right? But in terms of, and there's a lot of characters in the story. But every time, there was no depth to these characters, okay? There are four main black male characters, two pairs. Josh's buddies is pair number one. They seemed, they joked, they were fun on camera, they were fun on camera, but they also didn't have any depth. Josh had depth. His friends did not. Now, I'll give you two examples. At one point, Josh's girlfriend, she's a nurse. She's played by Fifi Dobson, who I really enjoyed watching. They're at Frederick's, big up Frederick's, good place to eat. I go there. She decides to pay for the meal, and they realize that she's a nurse. Josh tells them she's a nurse, and they're like, "Oh my God, she's a nurse! Wow, she must be the richest person in the world. She must be richer than a lawyer." They seemed to not even get the concept, at least in the film, of that a woman can be a nurse and a woman can afford, to buy food for them. Their eyes were blown up. You know what I mean? And just different things like that. They just seemed really silly, almost like a comic relief vehicle for the story, which is fine. But I'm looking for the black characters to be evolved. Some of the women, especially the women that revolved around the community center, they were evolved. They were helping each other out through different challenges. Where Josh's buddies, this first group of black men, very flat characters. They did show some emotion during some of the challenging scenes, but I want more. I want more, and I'll get to that in a second. I mean, look, Matthew Morris, deep character, right? The characters in Brother by David Cheriandy, deep characters. There are deep characters that come from Scarborough and Scarborough stories. I was looking for much more. The standard should be high. The other two black men in the film were Breeze and Jay. Breeze and Jay. Jay is one of the main protagonists. He looks like he is trying to escape his thug life, for lack of a better term. He's homeless. He lives with his girlfriend. He cheats on his girlfriend. He's got no money. He's got nothing going for him, except he has a higher moral compass than his brethren Breeze, who seems to be homeless as well. And his main thing is, I'm not soft. And life is all about stacking these cakes and getting with these chicks. And that's kind of the scope of those two characters. And they get in a fatal beef with another dude, who doesn't really say much, but the beef ends up being over a woman. Now this happens far too often, but in my mind, it showed very limited consciousness for these characters, limited depth. It was quite sad to watch. It was like it almost seemed like they decided to take some of the most basic stereotypes and just let them develop in these characters. And I'll give an example. Even after the shootings happened, there's nothing much that goes on in any of the characters. If you flash back to Boys in the Hood, for example, that's one of the classic hood movies, if you will, and a lot of black stories are inspired by Boys in the Hood. Remember Doughboy and remember Furious Styles. There's two types of consciousness that's demonstrated by these two characters. At the end of Boys in the Hood, Doughboy reflects on the murders that happened, and he says, "They showed this war overseas, but they didn't show what happened to my brother. And either they don't know, they don't show, or they don't care about what's going on in the hood." He's like, "I ain't got no brothers left." And then Trey's like, "You got one brother left, man." And he said, Trey's like, "You got one brother left." And they hug each other. Earlier in the film, Furious Styles, he's the father of Trey. He talks to them about gentrification. He talks to them about the proliferation of drugs and alcohol and guns in the neighborhood. And he says they want us to kill ourselves. And then Ricky and Trey were like, "Yo, your dad's deep." So that's an example of there is depth in in individuals who live in marginalized communities. And I don't really understand why the men in the film don't show any depth based on the choices of Ron Diaz. It's really sad. They use the N-word tons, which is fine, but it also is a choice of language that the writers chose, which it kind of just, in my opinion, overemphasizes stereotypical dumbness of these characters. And this is me as an educator, so I'm looking for consciousness. I'm looking to elevate. I'm looking for balance between different ways of expressing oneself, right? So I like this passage about the N word and the use of it by one of my heroes, Dr. Daniel Black.